What if the most important friendship in human history didn't begin with love, or loyalty, or even a single heroic moment? What if it started because two very different creatures were simply too cold, too hungry, and too tired to kill each other? Think about this. Every dog sleeping on your couch today, every tail that wags when you walk through the door, every wet nose nudging your hand for a treat, all of them share the same distant ancestor, a wild wolf, a predator that once saw humans as dinner, not as family. So how did a creature that could have eaten us end up guarding us, working with us, and curling up beside us at night? The answer isn't what you think. It wasn't a sudden decision. It wasn't magic. It was a quiet, accidental, 30,000-year-long negotiation, driven by scraps, warmth, and a little bit of desperation. Before we walk that long road together, from the frozen ice age to your living room, here's a simple request. If you enjoy stories that make history feel human, and a little bit furry, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Little Historical. It helps a new channel grow, and it tells me you want more stories just like this one. Now, let's go back to the beginning. To a freezing night, a dying fire, and the world's most unlikely houseguest. Imagine a night so cold that the stars themselves seemed to shiver. The wind did not howl, it whispered, low and hungry, slipping through bones and fur alike. Somewhere in that frozen darkness, a small circle of flickering light held the last warmth in a dying world. Around it sat a handful of exhausted creatures wrapped in poorly stitched hides, their faces hollowed by hunger and the quiet math of how many sunrises they had left. They were not kings. They were not heroes. They were survivors, clinging to a fire that barely deserved the name. And just beyond the ring of light, something else was watching. Not the bold, proud wolf that hunted with its pack. No. This was the other one. The one that ate last. The one that slept farthest from warmth. The one that had learned, through 1,000 small humiliations, that staying alive sometimes meant doing what no self-respecting wolf would do. It stepped forward, not with a snarl, but with a hesitation that looked almost human. Its ribs moved like a whisper under its skin. Its eyes caught the firelight and held something unexpected. Not rage, not fear, but a kind of tired, desperate curiosity. The humans saw it. Hands tightened around spears. Breath stopped. But no one threw. No one ran. Because in that frozen silence, both sides recognized something familiar. The same hollow stomach. The same aching cold. The same unspoken question hanging between them. Asterisk, what if we didn't have to face this alone? Asterisk. And then, someone did something reckless. Not brave. Reckless. A hand reached out, palm open, holding a scrap of burnt bone barely worth the name of food. The wolf did not lunge. It crept. Slow. Lowering its head. Making itself smaller. Making itself less of a threat. When its teeth finally closed around the offering, it did not growl. It backed away slowly, tail tucked, but its eyes never left the fire. That night, nothing else happened. But something had shifted. A door had cracked open, not of loyalty, not yet, but of possibility. The wolf returned the next night. And the next. And soon it was sleeping at the edge of the firelight, close enough to share warmth, far enough to flee. The humans did not name it. They did not pet it. They simply stopped reaching for their spears every time it breathed. That quiet truce, born of starvation and mutual exhaustion, would outlast every empire ever built. And that is how the first thread of the oldest friendship was woven, not in love, but in the desperate, wordless understanding between two predators too tired to be enemies. What happened next would change everything. Because soon, that lonely wolf brought friends. That lonely wolf brought friends. Not the strong ones. Not the proud ones who still remembered how to bring down a deer with their teeth. These were the leftovers of the pack, the ones with crooked gaits and uncertain eyes, the ones who had learned that the easiest meal was not the one you chased, but the one you waited for. They arrived at the edge of the human camp like shadows with bad reputations. And the humans, to their own surprise, did not drive them away. At first, the arrangement was nothing more than a shared silence. The wolves scavenged from the garbage pile, burnt bones, spoiled fat, the things even starving people refused to eat. The humans watched them from the firelight, hands never far from their spears. Every growl made fingers twitch. Every sudden movement made hearts race. There was no trust yet. Only a tense, unspoken agreement. Asterisk, you stay there. We stay here. Nobody dies tonight. Asterisk. But then something unexpected began to happen. The wolves, those nervous outcasts, started noticing things before the humans did. A rustle in the darkness that was too heavy for wind. A pair of eyes reflecting firelight from beyond the tree line. A scent carried on the cold air that did not belong. And when danger crept close, a cave lion, a rival tribe, something large and hungry, the wolves did not attack. They barked. Loud. Sharp. Annoying. The kind of noise that splits the night open and makes every sleeping human grab for a weapon. That barking saved lives. Not because the wolves were brave. They were not. They were terrified themselves. But terror has its own kind of honesty. And the humans, for the first time, realized they were no longer alone in the dark. Something else was listening. Something else was watching. Something else would raise its voice before the killing began. So the relationship changed. Quietly. Slowly. The wolves that barked at danger got more scraps. The wolves that stayed close to the fire got to stay closer still. And the humans, without ever saying it aloud, began to feel something they had not felt in a very long time. Not safety, but something closer to it than they had ever known. The wolves were not guards yet. They were not friends. But they were becoming something just as valuable. They were becoming witnesses to the same fragile, flickering life. And in that frozen world, that was almost enough. Almost. Because soon, the wolves would stop being wolves at all. The wolves would stop being wolves at all. Not overnight. Not even over a lifetime. But slowly, generation by generation, in ways no one present could possibly have noticed, something inside them began to bend. It was not a choice. It was not training. It was something far quieter and far more inevitable. The wolves that stayed near humans did not need to be the fastest or the fiercest. They needed only to be tolerated. And tolerance, it turned out, had a very specific shape. The wolf that hesitated before biting, that one lived. The wolf that wagged its tail instead of flattening its ears, that one got the extra bone. The wolf whose snout was just a little shorter, whose eyes were just a little wider, whose presence did not make the human children scream, that one was allowed to sleep closer to the fire. These were not grand heroic traits. They were small, almost embarrassing compromises. But evolution does not care about dignity. Evolution cares about what survives the night. And so, across thousands of years, the camp wolves began to change. Their skulls shrank. Their teeth softened. Their jaws grew weaker because they no longer needed to crush frozen bones alone. Their coats changed color, losing the gray of the deep forest for patches of brown and cream, colors that did not frighten the humans who fed them. Their ears, once sharp and alert, began to droop at the tips, giving them a softer, almost pleading expression. These were not wolves anymore. They were something else. Something that had traded the fierce independence of the pack for something far stranger, a place at the edge of a human shadow. But here is the secret that no historian likes to admit. The humans changed too. The ones who were patient with the wolves, who did not flinch at every growl, who shared their meager food even when they were hungry themselves, those humans survived longer. They had warning against predators. They had warmth on cold nights. They had something that the fearful, spear-happy neighbors did not have. Companionship. And so, without ever planning it, humans began to prefer the company of these strange, half-wild creatures. They sought them out. They protected them. They looked at a wolf with floppy ears and a hesitant tail and felt something unlock in their own chests. That was the true domestication. Not when the wolf came to the fire, but when the human looked back and smiled. By the time the first ancient civilizations rose from the dust, dogs were already there, waiting at the city gates, sleeping in the marketplaces, watching the kings with the same patient eyes as their ancestors had watched the fire. They were no longer wolves. They were family. And they had never once asked permission to stay. They had never once asked permission to stay. And yet, when the first great civilizations rose from the dust of the Ice Age, dogs were already there, curled at the feet of farmers, trotting beside merchants, watching from the shadows of temples that had not yet been named. Egypt found them first. Not as wolves, but as something almost divine. The jackal-headed god Anubis did not guard the underworld because he was fierce. He guarded it because he was patient. Because he knew where the boundaries were. Because he could smell the difference between a soul that was ready and one that still clung to the living world. The Egyptians saw that same quiet wisdom in the dogs that slept at their doorways, the ones who growled at strangers but never at children, the ones who knew exactly when to bark and exactly when to stay silent. But here is where the story takes a stranger turn. The Egyptians loved their dogs. They gave them names. They painted them on tomb walls. They shaved them bald because bald dogs were fashionable, which tells you everything you need to know about the strange vanity of powerful people. Yet even as they worshipped dogs in art, they still hesitated. A dog could sleep on a silk cushion, yes. A dog could eat from the same bowl as a noble child. But a dog could never fully enter the inner chambers of the human heart, not yet. There was still a wall there. A last, thin wall between usefulness and love. The Greeks climbed that wall next. They watched their dogs guard the city gates at night, bark at Persian spies, and fall asleep during philosophy lectures with a patience that Socrates himself admired. The word cynic, after all, means dog-like, and the Greeks meant it as a compliment. To live simply, to love without conditions, to snarl at nonsense and wag at kindness. But the Greeks, for all their wisdom, still kept a small distance. A dog was noble. A dog was loyal. But a dog was not quite family. Not yet. Then came Rome. And Rome did something unexpected. Roman soldiers marched into battle with dogs at their side, wearing spiked collars, carrying messages through enemy lines, dying in the mud alongside men who had no other friend to hold. Roman women buried their little lapdogs with tears and carved tombstones that read, more tenderly than anything written for a human, "You slept in my bed. You ate from my hand. You never once judged me." That was the moment the wall fell. Not because of usefulness. Not because of loyalty. But because the Romans finally admitted what every civilization before them had been too proud to say. A dog does not complete you. A dog sees you. And stays anyway. From that moment on, there was no going back. Dogs moved into the bedroom. Then the heart. Then the story of everything.